Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this live stream. We'll be together for a couple of hours, and we'll do the energy transfer toward the end or whenever we run out of topics to talk about or questions to answer. So the format, as usual, will be Q&A. You can ask about anything you'd like, either me or Barb, and then we'll do the energy transfer toward the end of the event. So you can ask about anything. I tend to focus more where Michaela's sessions are and Barb are focused more on the spiritual multidimensional side, although I can certainly address those questions. My topics mostly that we talk about here are how to use those spiritual principles and to live in the physical world during this time, because we are in a very significant time of great transition on the planet, where we're going from the world that we knew not that long ago to something quite a bit different. But the transition can be a little bit challenging, and my goal here is to help people to bring these spiritual principles and ideas into physical manifestation in our three-dimensional lives so that we can thrive here during this time and make informed, intelligent decisions as we transition to that future. So from that standpoint, any questions are perfectly legitimate to be asked here, and either Barb or I can answer them. So I think you brought something for show and tell as usual.
Oh yeah, I brought some of my crystal friends.
Okay, so why don't you start with that, and then we'll continue. And in the meantime, if anybody has questions for either of us, just go ahead and type it into the chat window, and we'll be happy to take those in order.
Well, the first one I wanted to show you, this is a spirit crystal. And there was a rock show from the Livingston County Rock Club. And of course I had to go. and there was only a couple booths that I really felt drawn to. But this one right here, it just resonated with me. It's got a lot of energy. It's got a little lavender in there. But apparently there's one area where they have spirit crystals, and I was so drawn to it. And I bought several, and I've been passing them out, but I kept this one for myself. And it's just as far as the crystal goes, it just said that it has so many directions, and it's just it's pulling energy from all different directions. So there's some going here and there, and it's just really powerful. I mean, it's got a lot of energy. As I'm holding it, I just feel this vibration, So anyway, that's my spirit crystal, and I absolutely love this one, And, I knew some people that were going through a hard time. One of my friends just lost his mom, so I gave him that and an agate. And it's really strange, this agate I was drawn to. When he set it up, it looked like his mother was walking away. There actually was her face and her body and the two legs walking. And I looked at that and I said, wow, I picked the perfect one for you. Because he had made a little altar for his mom, and then we had a day of, to celebrate her life. So, and my kyanite, what it told me this time, because I showed the kyanite before, and he says, you didn't tell everyone that I'm a triangle. He says, I go in three different directions, and I make a total triangle. And the point of that is it helps, kyanite's really good for grounding in that. But this one right here says, I never stop, and it wanted me to say that, and of course I did last time. Oh, this is kyanite, la la la. So, yes, I hear you. And this one right here is Smoky Quartz. Now, this is really a dark smoky quartz. And I got this one when I was out in Arkansas. And I just fell in love with it. It's got a little Arkansas crystal right here, and it just popped out right on the side. And the others, you don't usually see them this dark, or I just, and it's got a lot of points, and it's got a little bit of a double terminated on here. The double termination means that it has more energy. It's pulling in from the spirit, and it's pulling from Mother Earth, so the sky and the Mother Earth. So, I mean, it was no wonder I just, I saw that and I said, oh, that's mine. Okay. And let's see what else we have. Oh, we were talking about fluorite. And fluorite, and this one right here almost looks like a heart. It reminds me of the heart, or, because I just kind of see that shape in it. And it's green and lavender through it. And the green and lavender are just two colors that are actually, they're kind of like what I see sometimes on people. I see different shades of green, but this is a really nice balanced green for people to see. And the lavender, so actually I feel like this is a healing stone, because it has the lavender wrapped around it, and plus the green to just to get people focused on, whatever they need. And I decided to bring an agate. Now this comes from Lake Superior. This is Lake Superior agate. And the agates are usually, they're really rough on one side, and then they're smooth. And this one was, I think that they cut it, because it feels like it got cut. But you can see the pattern in there. It just, I thought it'd be interesting just to bring an agate for people to know what is an agate. Now, some of them are more colorful, but if you're just looking on the beach, this might be something typical you would see. Okay. Then once again, I went to this rock show, and just recently, and this caught my eye. Now this is citrine with a regular crystal on it, but you can see it's got so many points. This is another one that's really good for grounding, and it's just pulling in energy all over. And that was another one that who couldn't love something with all this crystal on the back with all these points? And the last one I brought today. Now, one of the guy that I bought this from, he came from, he was in the Livingston County Rock Show, and he actually found this one up north. And he told me if I put vinegar on this, that it would come white. I thought, well, I haven't tried that yet, but that'll be interesting. I'm going to try it and see what happens, and then I'm going to bring it back. And so we'll see. This is a to be continued rock. And also kind of looks like a heart. You see the kind of a heart shape. And although it doesn't have a lot of energy, it certainly has a lot of points. It says, get to the point. And, we always can use points. It always makes us focus on what we need to focus on, because these points are like, if you're going your life and you're looking at different things, that you need to work on. This is kind of like a reminder. Hey, we might not be so good right now, but watch us clean up and watch it, So it just, for me, that was a good learning process, and that's why this one came. And I had brought some of these before, but this one was actually wanting me to let you know that nobody's perfect, and all we can do is try. And we can't beat ourselves up, because we're not. But we can just go to do the best we can. And that's what this little rock was wanting me to give that message. So, and my last one is another crystal one. Now, I got this from Arkansas, and I just think that's so beautiful. Not only is it terminated on top, it's got one on the side here. It's got one down here. And the energy of this is like, I hold it like that. It's like, whoo. They sing to me in different vibrations. And this one has a really good vibration. It also has inclusions in here so you can see patterns. And if you just kind of use this is a really good meditation tool because you can focus on the inclusions and you can just kind of focus on what you need to work on. So, and that's why I brought this one today, because it just said that it wanted me to let you know that, things like this help with meditation. So I could just sit there and I can just look at that, and it's even got a star in here, which reminds me of the stars in the universe, and all the different things that we're going to see that we're just still learning about. It's just really good for me. It's just a really good thought of what we know and what we will know. Okay. That's all I brought for today.
I have a question. I have a lot of crystals all over my house, but I don't know if I have them in the right rooms. Like, do some crystals, are they like better for certain applications? Like, of course, I have my office where I do my work. I'm sleeping, my bedroom. I have the living room. Like, how do I know that they're in the right place?
I mean, I have moved mine around, but what happens is when you take the crystal and oh, I got this crystal, and you think, oh, I'm going to put it in the bedroom. It's already telling you that. So they kind of focus, they kind of pull you to focus on where you want to go. So, I mean, that's what I do. But they'll say, hey, and I say, all right, where do you want to go this time? And then I take them outside periodically especially when there's a full moon, to recharge. Although they seem to last a long time without recharging, but every so often one just, what happens is they kind of look dull, and that's when I know that they need to be recharged. And I'm putting them out on a full moon. People also bury them. People can take them into like a creek, or and put them in there and let the water flow over them, because that's natural, energy. It's just, there's so many different ways that you can recharge a crystal, but I like putting them out on a full moon. That's my favorite.
What about selenite? Sometimes I put my crystals on, like I have a big slab of selenite. Does that help them?
Yeah, selenite is really good. I actually went for the rock club, and we went to Grand Rapids, and they have a cellulite and alabaster mine, actually the building, and we go down the basement, and you can actually dig some of these things up. So I have gotten some selenite for that, but that helps your crystals, that does. It helps recharge. And then you can also use a wand. You can always take the wand, and you can take the crystal. This is the one I did, the work in progress, and you can just kind of just work on that, and it's already starting to shine, because that likes that energy. So I can see it sparkling. Do you see the sparkle coming? Yeah. Yeah. Can you guys see it? Yeah. How about you? Okay. So that's another tool that you could use. Believe me, I've got so many crystals and rocks. Whoops. Okay, I'm sorry. Ding.
How can we have benefits from different crystals? Because different crystals have different qualities.
Yes, they do.
Repeat the question.
Okay. What you said was, how can I tell the different crystals? Because different crystals have different qualities, right? For me, whatever I'm drawn to, like I'll go into, like, just for instance, they had this Livingston Rock show. They had it over in Waterford on Williams Lake Road at a church. They had them on the outside, and it had been raining that morning, so I waited, for the rain to stop. So then I walked up there, and I looked at all these different booths different people had different things. So what I just did is I walked through everything first, And then I walked to where I felt drawn to, and then I looked for what I was drawn to, and so you will find the crystal that you need. And it could be any kind, but whatever your field pulled for, you say, oh, and it could be nothing more than, wow, that's pretty, I like that, and it's telling you, look at me, I'm pretty. And so they'll give you what you need. Any rock that you choose or a crystal will give you what you need. You're not in charge, they're in charge. They're the ones that pull you towards them, so. And that's what I found. And I actually went to a store in Oxford, and I was going for something else. And then there's this rock room, and this girl's going, and so I looked at her and I said, well, this one really likes you, but this one, yeah. She says, I was kind of drawn towards that one. I said, trust your instinct, so, So anyway, I was glad. I never feel like there's any accidents. Yesterday, a couple of days ago, I went over to AAE in Waterford, and I wanted to check on one thing. So I went in there and I had a basket, and this lady collapsed right in front of me. So between me and the other two people, we were able to help her up, because she just tripped over a rug and fell. So, So I figured, and I mean, I just happened to be the perfect time to be there, and I stabilized the basket that I was using, so that between her and getting a hold of that and the two guys lifting her up, she was able to. I mean, if I hadn't gone in there, I wouldn't have been able to help. So I never feel like there's any accidents. I feel you're always supposed to be where you're supposed to be. So I hope, does that help?
Well, there is one question online. I'm going to direct this to Ethann. It's really about brands of light, like red light therapy and sleeping mats, but I'm going to take the question a little bit further because you are big into longevity and research, a lot of, longevity like supplements and things like that. So in addition to maybe recommending something for red light and sleep mat, you could extend that question and tell us what are some of the most recent things that you've been watching or paying attention to, or things that you've brought into your life?
So I do, and I have for some time spent a lot of time. I sort of walk both worlds, in the physical, in the third dimensional, and of course my background is very much rooted there in that prior to 10 years ago I was in the business and financial space before I stepped into this direction. So I still have a pretty strong foundation there that continues through to this day. And because of that, even though I have this thread of consciousness and spirituality throughout my life, I have always maintained it with a certain level of groundedness. And I find that that's something that's not very prevalent in the spiritual community. So many people in the spiritual community have both their feet in the clouds and forget that they incarnated into physical world. And so a lot of times we spend so much time working in multidimensional realms and things of that nature, and we forget that we live in this physical world. Now, there's nothing wrong with that if you are perfectly content and happy and fulfilled in your physical life. So if you are living blissfully on earth and you're focused entirely in the spiritual, as many monks, for example, maybe. They spend their time in monasteries. They don't really think about food or material things, and they, I would imagine, maybe not in every case, but don't want or desire for those things because they find fulfillment in their spiritual pursuits. Now, if that is you, then you can turn off this live stream and, go live your life however you are, because you don't need any of these things. But if you're living in a Western society these days, or even most Eastern societies, most of the population of the world lives in a place where they have to deal with governments and economies and money and jobs and politicians and medical institutions and billionaires, all of whom are meddling with your everyday life. So So I think, we have to acknowledge that we are here to live and walk a physical life as much as we are to walk it in a more spiritual way. It's not enough just to exist in the spiritual dimensions or the higher dimensions and neglect your physical life. Now, like I said, with the exception of some people. So some of you may have to actually eat food to survive. Not everybody does. There are some people who don't need to eat, but the majority of people do. So if you neglected that physical component, most of you wouldn't last here very long. And in the same way, if you neglect the other physical components of your life, then you may find that you're having suffering and hardship in those areas as well. I do find very commonly a lot of people in the spiritual conversation tend to be struggling financially or health-wise or emotionally or all of the above, and don't understand why, and the go-to is to ask the guides what to do, but not actually take physical action. So I guess what I'm trying to come back to is we have physical bodies and we have physical lives, and those physical bodies need to be cared for as much as our spiritual. So to live the optimal life, we have to do both. Now, we're living in a very extraordinary time, I think ultimately a very positive time, but in the transition from where we are to where we're going, oftentimes there will be some turbulence that takes place. Any time major change takes place in our own lives or on the planet, the old way has to disintegrate. And that disintegration process is not often comfortable because where we're going may be radically different. And that is where we are today. We are at a point where the world is shifting to a higher level of consciousness and also an entirely different society. And where the old guard, let's say, is struggling, although we may not think they are, to maintain control of the existing system and structures of the world as a result of the awakening of consciousness that's taking place. And a lot of people ask about when's disclosure going to happen, and disclosure is happening now because so many people are becoming aware of things that have been going on in our world for hundreds of years that we never even paid attention to. Even myself, I've immersed in these things for a long time, and yet in the last couple of years I've become aware of so many other things that I didn't even know were going on for a long time. So this is disclosure. It's our own individual journeys to the discovery of how the world really works and all the intricacies of that. And so as we go forward, more and more people are going to experience this awakening and coming to an awareness of how the world works and who runs it and the good and the bad and all of that. And in that process, we'll be able to make different decisions as we go into the future to create a better world. So in that context, not only are we in a time when there are huge breakthroughs taking place in technology and science and spirituality and so on, but we're also seeing major breakthroughs in the area of anti-aging and health and longevity as well. Because anytime consciousness expands, we're going to witness an increase in the health of the people and also lifespans. So we will, in the next 50 to 100 years, notice significant increases in lifespans and increases in health span. Health span meaning people being healthy longer, not just living longer. It's not enough to live for 100 years or 150 years and beyond and be in a miserable state of health, but you want to be in an optimal state of health for as long as possible and die a very peaceful life. And that's ultimately where we are going as a society, is our lifespans and our health spans are going to continue to increase as consciousness expands. And that's why we're seeing so much work being done in the area of anti-aging and optimal health. So in that context, red light therapy is one of those things which has been in the spiritual or alternative health space for a long time and has been used pretty extensively, but didn't have a lot of respect, of course, as many things in that area don't often get in the beginning. But since then, in the last decades, we've seen an immense amount of research and scientific studies that have been done into light therapy, in particular red light therapy, that have been shown significant positives in terms of not only healing major health problems, but also just anti-aging, and it's been heavily used in the biohacking field, which, I would encourage any of you who have health problems to, instead of focusing so much on the health problem, because, I always contend that the biggest problem in the world today with, for example, cancer, which trillions of dollars have been spent on curing cancer for the last decades, and yet they've never, quote unquote, cured cancer. And of course, there's a reason for that, of course. I mean, there's no incentive to cure something when there's trillions of dollars at stake. But secondly, the fundamental consciousness of the idea of focusing on an illness just perpetuates that illness. So we create a consciousness on the planet where cancer continues to become an issue and will never go away until we ignore it. Where on the other hand, if we just ignored cancer from the very beginning and stopped making cancer groups and cancer meetings and cancer ribbons and cancer societies and all these things, cancer would have been cured a long time ago. So wherever we give our attention, we create more of that same thing. So if you have a particular health problem, the best solution is don't join a group. If you join a support group for it, then you're just going to perpetuate the problem, because that group is filled with people who are suffering. Now, there's a difference between having an illness and suffering. Okay, if you have an illness, that's one thing. Suffering from an illness is the continual creation and perpetuation of that illness. So you don't want to join a group full of people who are suffering from an illness, because you're just going to perpetuate and continue that illness within yourself, within your consciousness and within your body. But instead, you want to consider joining a group. Well, first of all, you don't need to join anything. But if you want to join a group instead of biohackers. People who are instead pursuing how to live for 150, 200 and plus years in extraordinary health. Because that group is focused on the consciousness on life extension and health span, and not suffering from an illness. So you join that group, and by pursuing extraordinary health, you naturally get rid of the problem you came in there with in the first place. So the biohacking field does use light therapy pretty extensively for many treatments, including cancer, actually. And there's a lot of scientific research into the benefits of its use in all those areas, but also just anti-aging in general, the improvement of skin health as well, physical appearance. There are light therapy devices for your face if you want to improve wrinkles and things like that. So it is a really great technology for so many things. Now, with anything, there are different products on the market. Some are very good quality and some are not very useful at all. With light therapy, as with many things, you get what you pay for. The more expensive devices, which if you're looking for a full body light therapy device, the more expensive devices tend to be in the $1,000 range or above. But you can get little squares that are a few hundred, and just if you're just treating a particular area. And so, I would suggest looking into those. There are a few that pop into my head. There's a company called Red Rush. There's another one. There's a really popular one on the market. I cannot remember the name of it, but what's that? Juve. Yeah, Juve is a popular one. It's also one of the most expensive ones in the market. I don't think necessarily it's that much better than some of the slightly less expensive ones, but they have got a good marketing program, and as a result, they just tend to charge more for their products. There's also, although I don't know if they still sell very many, I personally have an actual mat you lay on. So it has red, yellow, and I think this is red and yellow. Yeah, red and yellow light. So yellow light is more useful for the surface of the skin. So it doesn't really penetrate the body too much. and there are different bandwidths of red light. Some will penetrate deeper into the body, some are more on the surface. So if you're treating an illness that is more deep within the skin or within the body, you want to use certain frequencies of red light, whereas other frequencies of red light are better for treating things that are more on the surface, let's say psoriasis or something. And yellow light is really more for the complexion. So if you want to improve skin health or wrinkles or things like that, red light is good for that. But going further into the anti-aging conversations, there's so many things out there, and as we are moving further and further into a more expansive consciousness, there is just breakthroughs coming out every week these days. So from nutritional supplements to all kinds of use of vibrational therapies, even in medicine now, they have different frequency technologies that they're starting to use to treat illnesses that previously could not have been treated that way. So we're starting to see the merging between what has been alternative health and what has been scientific and medical health. And they're coming together in a place that I think is very positive for the future. In terms of nutritional supplements, I could go on forever. There's so many things in that area. It depends on what you're trying to do. Now, my goal is, I focus not only on the spiritual, but also the physical. So I want to try to extend the vitality and health of this physical body as long as I can, so that I can be here and do what I want to do as long as I possibly can. And so from that standpoint, I use all of those things. I use a range of more advanced nutritional supplements and light therapies and all kinds of things. Filter my water. So we can go in 10,000 different directions when it comes to that topic. But so if anybody has specific questions about that, I'm happy to answer them.
Is there a kind of bottled water in mind? Like the one with the electrolytes, which one is better?
Well, with bottled water, now bottled water depends on the brand, but some of them are actually tap water that's filtered. Like I think I want to say there's a Pepsi brand I can't think of off the top of my head, but Dasani, yeah, Dasani is basically bottled water.
You see the one with it's like essentials, or
Right.
they have a lot of the boutique water. How do you know?
Yeah, you don't need that. Nothing wrong with that. And also you want to keep in mind that even some of those boutique waters are fluoridated. They later add fluoride to them. So I think the best bet is to get your own system and then filter it yourself. If you can't do that, then bottled water is fine. I would stick to a more pure source, like maybe Icelandic water that's from a glacier or something like that. Or there are lots of research reports online where they've done analysis of the different water companies to see what's actually in the water. It's a little bit risky these days because a lot of these companies are buying, as Michaela during the channeling was talking about, water is one of the biggest problems we're facing because many large corporations and billionaires are buying water rights around the world to where they own the water in a particular area. And so they have the rights to pump it out of the ground and sell it, and you may not, before too long, be able to go there and drink water from a spring or something because it's not legal because it's privately owned. But the problem with water then from bottled sources is unless you research that particular manufacturer, they can change their system all the time. Now there is a company out of Maine that's called Raw Water, I believe. If any company I would say might be okay, would be that one. Now they pump it right out of a natural spring and they don't do any processing. But the side effect of that is because the water isn't sterilized, if you let it sit around too long, it will grow algae. And that's why other bottled water never grows algae because it's sterilized and it's processed. So that's how you know if a water is really pure. If it doesn't grow any algae, then everything in there has probably been killed from radiation or some sort of sterilization process, and quite often fluoride is added back into it, which you want to try to avoid.
What about distilled water? Would that be an option?
If you're buying distilled water from the store and assuming that it's just distilled and they're not adding fluoride back into it, then that's fine. The only caveat to that is make sure you're buying it from a store that has quick turnover of their products, because if distilled water sits in a plastic bottle for too long, it will absorb all the chemicals from the water and make the water toxic. But if the water is constantly being turned over, then it doesn't really sit in there long enough. Or water, if it's stored in intense heat or in sunlight, can also absorb the plastic chemicals in the plastics. So I would say, for example, if you're buying from a store like Walmart, not that I'm suggesting you shop at Walmart, but they have significant turnover. So if you're buying distilled from there, it probably was distilled not too long ago. Or Absopure, for example, which is a local company that makes distilled water, and their products are probably turned over very quickly, and you may not have to worry about it so much with that. Or distill it yourself. You can get a distiller online for $100 that you can filter your own water from out of your own house. There's some debate as to whether distillation removes fluoride 100%, and I'm not 100% sure about that. I think fluoride, in order to be removed, may have to be processed through activated alumina or through coral calcium. Those are the only two ways I know are extremely effective. I'm not sure if distillation will remove fluoride.
I'd like to add to that. My friend Michael got me into Zero Water, and there is actually a unit where I took my well water, which I could not drink, because it's just ugh. So he actually poured some of it through this Zero Water system, and it tasted wonderful. So yeah, I invested in that, and and he says it takes all the fluoride out, and you can even test the water. My water was like 170, and after running it through there, it was 0. So that's something else to think about. And they're only like $40 for the unit, and then the cartridges are what it's expensive, because you have to keep changing those. They say when it gets to 0.6, then you need to get rid of that cartridge and get another one. And but he proved it to me, because I haven't been able to drink my water for quite a while since they changed the pipes in the well. So it just tasted so awful. And when I could actually drink my water, I almost cried. It's so I mean, that is an option, so I just thought I'd share, because I had personal experience with it.
Water purity is probably one of the most important things that I think we need to pay attention to in the world today, because it has become very toxic in the last 100 years, not only through chemicals and those kind of things, or even additives like fluoride, but also it's become very toxic through frequency, through all the electromagnetic frequencies that are present on the planet and other kinds of frequencies that are impregnating the water, not to mention pharmaceutical drugs and all these things. So a lot of people are on drugs these days, even though they're not actually taking any drugs, because the water, unless it's filtered, is going to contain pharmaceutical residue. Now, you can filter pharmaceutical residue with as simple as a carbon filter, but carbon filters do not have a long lifespan. So if you do use carbon filtration, you'll have to replace it very often. But I think that's one of the most important areas. And this is probably part of the reason why the world went insane the last 2 years, because people are drinking fluoridated water in many parts, especially in the U.S., and fluoridated water does tend to numb our senses and our intellectual abilities. So we are not as likely to be able to think clearly, and are more in kind of a less alert state, let's say, less intelligent state.
There's a couple questions for Barb. When you're circling with the crystal as a wand, what differences and or advantages will it make if you circle counterclockwise or anti-clockwise? Oh, sorry, circle clockwise or counterclockwise. What direction do you usually prefer?
Well, when I'm doing a circle, an energy circle, and I lock, all the stones connect together, I go in a counterclockwise direction. But my crystal just said that it doesn't, when you're working on an individual one, it says it doesn't really care. But my preference is counterclockwise. The opposite. Think of a clock and just go the opposite. The clock goes this way, so you go that way. And it just, for me, it just, excuse me, it just it seems so natural for me to just do it counterclockwise. It feels stronger. It feels comfortable. Clockwise, it feels like it's an effort. So, and but now if I was in Australia, I would do the opposite. I would go clockwise, not rather than counterclockwise, because it's the other side of the world, and they just, they have a different frequency there. So whatever you do on this side of the equator, you do just the opposite on the other side of the equator. So, and that's something people don't really think about.
So this is for Barb. I gift crystals to others when I feel intuitively inclined. What does it mean when the crystal breaks or cracks?
Oh, well, I've had them break and crack before. It all depends on exactly what you're using it for. I mean, I'll tell you my worst case scenario. I was working on a woman with throat cancer, and I had put rocks and crystals around, and I took a big, huge amethyst cluster, and I put it on her throat. She had all this chemo and stuff. So what happened, I was holding points on her head, and I watched all that chemo come out through the rock. It pulled it pretty much out, and then it shattered. So, I mean, it served its purpose. It's not something that I really want to do, but, I mean, rock really sacrificed itself for that particular purpose. Now, if crystals, rocks, break, they just want to be divided. Maybe they want, instead of just one piece, they want to have two pieces, so that maybe one piece you keep and one other person you can share, to somebody else. So it's really, unless you're specifically using it for healing like I did, my poor crystal, but hey, it was worth it because the lady, got all that bad stuff out of her system. So that was really great. So no, I don't worry about it. And I had one that it fell on the floor and cracked in half, and I just took glue on it. I asked if it was okay, and they said, yeah, and I just stuck it back together. So you can do that too.
Okay, so question for Ethann. Did you legally change your name? I've been using a name from Kabbalarian philosophy, but haven't changed it legally. If not, do you have any insights or support about how to operate with a new name that's not legally changed?
Yeah, it's in terms of numerology, the name does not have to be made legal. So numerology it's more important that the name is used. So, for example, some people have one legal name, but they use a different name in their everyday life. Even though the legal name is still going to have some influence vibrationally on their life, it's the name they're using that's going to have the bigger impact. So in that sense, if you have a different legal name that you were born with and you're using a different name due to numerology, the name that you're using that other people know you by the most is the name that's going to have the bigger impact on your life. So let's say, like in my case, if Ethann Fox was my new numerology name, which it is, and I never made it legal, then it wouldn't matter because nobody knows me by my old name anymore, with the exception of my family, who doesn't call me my old name anyway. So the name that I'm using now is a public figure name that's used by thousands of people, and all those people think of me as Ethann Fox, and I go by that name as well. So it wouldn't really matter whether it's legal or not, because the frequency of that name that is Ethann Fox is what is resonating out to the universe and creating my reality. So from that standpoint, it doesn't really matter. Now, I did make my name legal years ago. So in terms of my advice to you, as far as how do you use a name that's not legal, It depends on with every person. It depends to what degree you need to function inside the mainstream system, and you don't. Because if you can live your life and not function 100% inside of the current structure of the world, then you don't really need to make a legal name. And to a great extent these days, I function mostly outside of the mainstream world. Now, to most of you, it may appear as if I'm functioning inside of the mainstream world, but that's the illusion of it. It seems like I am, but to a great extent, I don't. I do where it's inconsequential, where there are things that I may need to do that it's just easier just to do it that way. But to a great extent, I don't really participate in a lot of those things that everybody else participates in, and I actively have removed myself from those things. So let's say, for example, if you need to have a legal name to get a job, if you have a job or start a business, you could always register a corporate entity to do business as, and just keep your old legal name for bank accounts and things like that. You can also get an LLC under your new name without actually going and making your name itself legal, and just function as, like in my case, Ethann Fox LLC. And so I can take that name and create a bank account if I wanted to, and get a tax ID under that name and do business as Ethann Fox LLC. There are lots of ways to do this without actually making it legal. But there are certain benefits to making it legal too. So, I would have to know about each person's, like the person who's asking the question, your unique situation and what it is you're wanting to accomplish in order to explain what would be the best scenario. But in terms of numerology, legal doesn't matter unless you need to use your legal name in what you're doing in your everyday life to a significant extent. In that case, for example, let's say you're a lawyer, in which case you probably wouldn't be asking this question anyway. But let's say you are, and in court you have to use your legal name on a regular basis, or in dealing with clients and things like that. Because now, as a lawyer, you are immersed within the legal structure. You have to function there to a great extent. And in that case, your legal name is absolutely required. And in that case, I would say making it legal is a good idea. So, another thing to keep in mind, which may or may not apply to you, is within the structure of the legal system, your legal name, which is on all of your documents in uppercase letters, to indicate that it is not the human you. So whenever your name or any corporate entity name is in all uppercase letters, which it is on all legal documents, it is indicating a legal version of you, a not alive version of you. So it's just an entity that is created by the system to allow you, the body that is you, the human that is you, to function inside of the system. So the Ethann Fox that's in all lowercase letters cannot function inside of the system, but the Ethann Fox that is in all uppercase letters can. And that Ethann Fox can get credit cards or bank accounts or whatever the case may be. So when you change your name inside of the system from one to another, the judge will ask you, are you doing this to avoid any debts or to avoid taxes? And the reason they ask you that is because you are essentially dying in the legal system. So your previous entity essentially is deceased inside of the system, and therefore those previous taxes and debts cannot be carried forward to the new name, because the new name is being born inside of the system on that day as an entirely new legal entity that is not the same as the old one. So in theory, you can go forward in the new name without being tied to the legal, with the exception of if you did something really bad in the previous one, then they can probably still come after you. But for most practical purposes, the legal ongoings of the previous entity that was you are not connected to the new one. So there may be some reasons where that would be a good idea for you if you're wanting to leave something from your past behind. So there, it's a very complex subject, and it's different for every person as to what makes the most sense. I would say, I've worked with a lot of light workers over the years and who've changed their names, and I generally advise not to change it legally unless there's a reason to, or wait a few years and see if you end up deciding to keep that name and there's a good reason to change it, then make it legal. But it's not really necessary because you can do business as a legal entity, as a legal LLC or corporation, as that new name without making it a legal name of yours.
Okay. I want to kind of go back for a minute to the longevity question because there's also something in there about sleeping mats. And I'm not sure if she's referring to a grounding mat or a crystal bed. Do you have any input on that?
That could be 1,000 different things, really. Some clarification on the question would be good because, you can sleep on a light mat. But there's also crystal mats. There's, so many kinds there's frequency mats you can sleep on. There's meditation, devices. There's so many different technologies these days. I think that's one of the great things about the time we're living in, although on the surface it appears the world has gone to hell. But at the same time, there's so many amazing breakthroughs that are happening in the world in every area. And these are the things we need to pay attention to. We also need to pay attention to all the craziness that's taking place too, because like it or not, you're going to have to navigate this time somehow. And you're going to have to navigate this time financially. You're going to have to navigate it in terms of your health and make intelligent choices, not the mainstream choices, because the mainstream choices will not lead you to good health. You want to, because we're at a time right now where there's extremes. There's extremes that are very mainstream that will lead you to ill health. And there's also the opposite extreme, which there are huge breakthroughs in anti-aging and longevity and all kinds of healing in different illnesses that are taking place also. So 50 years from now, we are going to see people who are living well into their hundreds in mass. Now we see them in small pockets and blue zones around the world, but we are going to see a large portion of the population living for extended periods of time, and a large portion of the population will die very young because of poor choices. Now you have to decide which side you're on. The same is true for the financial system right now. We are in the midst of a major financial collapse. And many people are going to suffer as a result of that because they're following the mainstream narrative. But at the same time, there are opportunities right now for people to go from broke to billionaire if they want to. It's just a matter of what choices you make and the way your vibration or your frequency is focused on the planet at this time. If you're focused in a higher vibrational state, you will be led to better choices and to narratives that are going to be more positive for you to live a more vibrant, healthy, happy life. There's so much in society today that is trying to move people toward a more fear-based way of being, and that fear-based way of being is a great environment to cultivate all kinds of negative behavior and not so positive choices. And that's why we've seen so many insane things on the planet the last couple of years. Nothing that's new, it's been going on a long time, but it's going to become more accelerated in the rest of this decade because the people who are at the top of society who are creating all of these or orchestrating these things are losing control. And as they lose control, imagine yourself, it may be hard to do, but imagine yourself as somebody who has an unlimited amount of financial resource and power on the planet, and there's nothing else to do but to gain more power. More money won't do you any good. So from that standpoint, if you realize that you're losing power and losing control, and you may even be losing control of the financial system, what do you do at that point? You have to take more strict measures and steps to maintain your power and control. And this is what we're seeing happening on the planet today and will continue to escalate in this decade. As they lose power, they'll be doing more serious and extreme things to maintain that power and control. So it's up to you by your vibration to choose, are you going to go along with that narrative and live in that state of fear, or are you going to go in this other direction where you could be living in a more extraordinary state of health and well-being and wealth as well, if money is something you need. Now, if you are living in a tribe in the middle of nowhere and you don't need money, then great. You don't need to worry about that. But if you're living in most societies today where some form of currency is needed to exchange for food or other goods, then money is something you need to also pay attention to. And it's something that I see in the spiritual community we tend to neglect, because we think that if we just pray to the guides and to whoever, that everything will be given. And that is true. Certainly, if we maintain a certain vibration, we can attract a positive life. But we did not come here to planet Earth to not live physically too. It's not enough for us to meditate in a corner and hope for positive things to come. We actually have to leave the house and do things too. Otherwise, why bother being here? You could have just simply stayed in a multidimensional state, and there's no reason to be in a third-dimensional reality amongst all this suffering and have to make positive choices to live here. Ultimately, being here as physical human beings is to live fully in all respects, to walk in a physical body in this density, but to walk it in a higher vibrational state while being connected to all of your multidimensional aspects. So to walk here as a God, to walk here as a human being who is in a highly conscious state of being, and to have all that you need in this physical life to live fully, whatever that is for you. You know, for some people, that may be as simple as raising a family and having children and grandchildren and getting married, and that may be it. For somebody else, it may be to create a global movement and do big things, and each of those will have different needs. And whatever those needs are, you are here to create those things. And to create those things, you have to take physical steps as well as existing in a higher multidimensional state or in a higher vibrational state.
On that thread of energy, and this is for Ethann and Barb, maybe you can add something. How does a person keep their frequency and energy as high as possible?
Well, I mean, for me, I surround myself with different tools, like crystals, to help me. And then I do, some meditation, and positive affirmations, do a lot of positive. And you got to watch your words. You can't say anything negative, because that'll attract you. So you always have to create things in a positive way, and if the doctors tell you that you have something, well, I'm not owning that. I mean, you say I have, I'm not accepting that. I kind of push it away, and understand that you have to deal with it, but you don't accept it. So therefore, and I am not accepting the things that have been going on with me, but I found a way to take care of them. So, and that helps me be in a more higher things, be like very positive, and when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And I mean, believe me, and when I worked for the government, the post office, for 42 years, and I made a lot of lemonade, especially the last place I was in. I mean, it got to be so negative that the boss and I actually laughed about it. I said, okay, what did they say today? Let's make it a be positive. Yuck, 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 So that's how I handle it. I try to take anything that's negative and turn it into positive. I mean, like when my little kitty passed, I wrapped her in a blanket and I put her next to me, and we took there, and she's looking all around, and she's ready for her last ride. And sure, it was emotional, but she was ready to go across the Rainbow Bridge. So, I just let people know, and I shared, she was a wonderful cat for 22 years, so, she was ready to, in almost 1 month, she made it almost 1 month, but not quite. But she had had enough. And so rather than, making it as negative, I just put it as a positive, okay, she's up there. When it's my turn, she'll be one of those animals that I'll wait to see, so it's always trying to be in the positive, and like I said, really be careful of your words. Try to keep them on a higher vibration, and don't use the negatives. Just keep doing the positives. I mean, that's how I handle it. Now it's your turn.
Well, I find that the biggest obstacle to living in a higher vibrational state is the attempt to live in a higher vibrational state. So many people, especially in the spiritual space, are trying so hard to be in this high vibrational state that they are just pushing it farther away. And the more important thing, I think, is to be in a state of non-resistance to wherever you are. So let's, in your astrology cycles or just cycles that happen throughout your life, there are going to be different times where you're meant to experience different things. And there may be days where you wake up in a bad mood, or other days where things don't go your way. And when those things happen, let's say you have a particular illness or a particular emotional state, or in the earlier channeled example where somebody was talking about they hadn't slept in several years or were bedridden, and the guide's advice was to be where they are, and instead of being in resistance to where they are and trying to be somewhere else. And this is one of the biggest obstacles I see to being in a higher vibrational state is the willingness to accept and embrace where you are and to be fully in it. So let's say, for example, you're feeling a particular emotional pain from something, maybe a loss that happened in your life. And most human beings will feel that loss and will also feel like they shouldn't be feeling that loss. And so they'll try to move themselves out of that loss, or will feel guilty for that because society is judging you for feeling that way. And the better answer is to immerse yourself as fully as you can in whatever emotion you're feeling, or whatever non-higher vibrational state you think you're feeling. And feel it fully. And in the feeling of it fully, it is more likely to go away and disappear, and then you'll be back at this higher vibrational state. The problem isn't the emotion. It never is, because we are human beings. We're meant to feel emotions, or else you wouldn't be here in human bodies that feel emotions. So emotions are good. Emotions are part of the dynamics of being human that we all came here to enjoy in this life. But when we resist emotions, then is where suffering happens. And in the resistance of those emotions, you prolong those things, and you prolong that suffering, and you keep yourself farther away from that state of higher vibration. So when you find yourself in a state that you think is not higher vibrational, or you're experiencing a negative emotion, allow yourself to go into the emotion or state that is less appealing until it breaks apart and you're back where you are. So that's how I would deal with negative emotions. And that way, what you'll find is that those moments where you don't feel that you're in this higher state become shorter and shorter. So whereas before, an emotional state that was lower might have lasted days or weeks or months or years, it may just last a few moments or a few minutes or a day, and it's gone. And you move on. So that's one thing that I would suggest. The other thing is you want to, instead of, as I said earlier with my cancer example, don't join a cancer group. So if you want to cure cancer, in the same way, if you want to raise your vibration, I would say don't join a spiritual group, because a lot of the spiritual group is focused on how to raise your vibration. and there tends to be a lot more struggling and resistance to higher vibration in those environments. Instead, move toward things that make you happy more often. And that could be as simple as, I mean, there's so much scientific research these days on the benefit of bright colors. And the funny thing is, I was born in India. And in India, at least back in the day, I imagine it's still true today, everything's bright colors. Even our houses are bright colors. And yet in the United States, I find we barely ever use bright colors. Everything's very neutral here. And I think it speaks to the passion of the culture. Cultures that use brighter colors tend to be more passionate, and also potentially more positive, depending on what colors they are. But there have been lots of scientific research studies done in the United States and abroad into the use of bright colors. And if you just simply painted your environment in bright colors, you'd probably improve things. Or surround yourself with things that make you happy. Instead of looking at the bigger picture of meditating for 30 years and reaching the higher state of bliss, which is certainly a path you could follow, but you can do smaller things now, and those smaller things can be things in your environment that make you happy. Maybe you wear nicer clothes that makes you happy. Maybe there are certain people who, if you spend more time with, they make you happy. So maintaining a higher vibration can just be a collection of lots of little things that you do in your life that help you to stay in that heightened state more often. And in addition to that, use tools like meditation and light therapies and things of that nature. Certainly there is a lot of evidence to the benefits of meditation. If you find that you're of a Western mindset and you can't shut off your mind, then there are technologies you can use. You can use binaural beats and things like that. There's a little headset I use called Brain Tap, which is a little headset that has glass visor with lights in it, and it creates sound waves and light patterns that move your brain into different brainwave frequencies. So if you can't meditate normally, then that may be a way for you to do it. And the longer you do it, the more your natural brainwave patterns reach a state of stillness, to where even in the midst of chaos, you are in stillness. So there are so many paths to doing it, but I would say those are some to consider. And of course, certainly food and all of those things are factors. I mean, the lighter foods you eat, the more you are going to maintain a higher vibrational state. Denser foods will lower your vibration and increase the density in your body. So, of course, energy transfer, we're talking about removing the density, but you can put density on even as simple as eating. And there's nothing wrong with eating, but when you eat too much, or you eat a lot of very dense foods, that does tend to weigh your energy field, your consciousness down. Now, if you are an extremely high vibrational being who is barely rooted in the physical dimension, and there are some human beings on the planet today who are so much light that they can't walk on Earth very easily, for them, eating denser foods is good, because that may provide them with the anchor to be able to stay in their physical body long enough to do whatever they want to do. But for most people, who, especially in Western societies, either eat too much or eat foods that are way too dense. And in that case, lighter foods would be certainly helpful. Like for some, before Flower of Life existed, it was a bunch of different group meetings. And one of the meetings, which Barb talks about, is our raw food group. And the raw food group was focused on eating live foods. And one thing I noticed is people of that group tended to have a more positive attitude, and their health problems were significantly minimized as well, as also because the lighter your body is, the lighter your consciousness is, the easier it is for health problems to flow through you, as opposed to getting stuck there. So those are just a few suggestions.
So Ethann, if we hold the intention to also lift density from the collective during an energy transfer, will they also benefit, or do they have to be a willing participant to receive healing?
Well, that's already happening anyway. You don't necessarily have to do that. So as a product or a side effect of me doing this years ago, Michaela and I channeled about it some years ago, and whether or not doing it on a collective basis was a good idea. And for a while, we did separate events that were just focused on the collective and live stream some of those. But all of these events are that way, so it's already happening anyway. The last couple of years, a lot of things changed in what we're doing as an organization too, simply because the climate of the world has changed, and so we've adjusted. And if you pay attention to all of what's taking place in the world, not what you hear in the mainstream news, but what's really taking place, then it appears as if we're going in the wrong direction in many respects. But I can assure you that the astrology cycles are all heading in the right direction long term. But one thing that we came to the conclusion was that it was things like the energy transfers that we were doing on a global scale in the years prior that in some respects caused this fallout to take place on the planet today, in the sense that for hundreds of years or even thousands of years as a society, we've been heading in a not so positive direction. But we didn't know. Most of us didn't even know it was taking place. I mean, fluoride's been in the water for a long time. But most people don't even know today. I mean, there's chemicals being sprayed in the skies for decades now, but most people didn't even know. I noticed it when it first happened because I used to be a sungazer years ago. I used to go out there twice a day and stare at the sun, and the skies were crystal clear. And then all of a sudden, I started noticing planes were spraying things, and nowadays it's nearly impossible to get a clear sky anymore. But these things have been going on forever. The banking system that controls everything. But what happened in the last 2 years is everything becomes so overblown that more people are noticing it now. So what happens when consciousness explodes into expansion is we start noticing everything. We see things that we never saw before, that have been going on forever. We didn't know. And what's happening in society today is that at an exponential rate, more and more people are starting to notice the things that have been there all along for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and they can't ignore them anymore. And this is what happens when you have a collective consciousness expansion, is world events happen on such a large scale that it forces the awakening and disclosure of everything. And so while many people are expecting aliens to land on the White House lawn and declare themselves to be here as the sign of disclosure, that's not really how disclosure happens. Disclosure just happened in the last 2 years because so many people realize that we're living in an extremely corrupt society with a corrupt medical system, with governments and overlords who don't have very good intentions. And that is consciousness. So yes, we can do that on a collective scale, and yes, we have been doing that all along. But, beware what you ask for, because the consequences of that are things are going to escalate in the short term, and as they do, more people are going to notice things that they, even most of you know people who even to this day don't notice anything. They still are following the mainstream narrative and don't realize that anything is out of the ordinary. But they're going to become more and more uncomfortable in this decade. And as they do, more people are going to start noticing these things. And this is what happens when consciousness expands on a global scale, is world events take place, not local events. And those world events force people to realize and to notice things that have been there all along. And which then gives them, well, initially it may scare them a little bit and make them feel powerless, but in the long run, it'll give them the ability to make different choices in their life. Like maybe you filter your fluoride, or maybe you eat healthier, or maybe you exit the financial system and participate more in this alternative financial system that is more self-empowering. And those are the things that are being available to us. This is why we're seeing a duality in society today, a split in timelines, is because consciousness has grown so much in recent years. And that divide is going to continue to become more and more divided, because the group that is on the higher consciousness side is going to go more in that direction, and the other side is going to keep going more in that direction until eventually they come back around. So yes, you can do that, but you don't really need to do that. You can just focus on yourself, your family, whatever. It is already happening on a global scale. And we don't really need to ask permission of the collective consciousness, because this is something that was always meant to happen now. So it isn't an individual choice as to whether or not the collective is going to go through an awakening at this time. It is something that the collective has already chosen to do. And people like me or other people who are doing other consciousness work are just here to play a role in facilitating that. Keep in mind that I'm not doing anything. The Ethann Fox, the ego that is here, is not facilitating the energy transfer. This is a 13th dimensional collective that operates outside of our third dimensional egoic desires and wants. They know what is best for the collective, and they're overseeing all the other dimensions. So what is needed for the collective is already being done through them, just simply using this structure because it happens to exist in this third dimension. So the answer is yes, but you don't really need to focus on it. You can if you want, and that's totally fine.
Okay. So someone posted, can I please get some more information on sun gazing? I find I can stare at the sun now, but how long is recommended?
Well, I'm not somebody who is a teacher in that subject, but I can tell you what I was taught and what I practiced. And there are other people who are experts or teachers who focus entirely in that area. You may want to find some of them. But sun gazing has been practiced for thousands of years. It was practiced in ancient times, ancient Egyptians, and even in India. It's still practiced today. In fact, there are some individuals in India who have practiced sun gazing for decades and who attribute not having to eat any food or drink anything to in all those decades to sun gazing. And sun gazing can certainly have those benefits at extreme practice. So if you do become an extreme practitioner, you may find that you don't have to eat, or you don't want to anymore, or drink anything. And some of these individuals have been studied by scientists and doctors to understand what's happening in their physiology when they practice sun gazing. But sun gazing, for most people who are starting out, it's recommended that they start with 15 seconds within 1 hour of sunrise or 1 hour before sunset. Most people's eyes are not acclimated to sun gazing at other hours during the day because there can be too much ultraviolet radiation, which can damage the eyes. But within the first hour and the last hour of the day, generally that radiation is very minimal, and so you don't have the harmful effects on the eyes. So most sun gazing teachers recommend you start with 15 seconds. So you just go out there between first hour of sunrise and the last hour of sunset. Just look directly at the sun, 15 seconds, and then go home or whatever. And next day, add another 15 seconds. And then add another 15 seconds until you get to about 45 minutes. So at the latter part of your practice, you're probably about 9 months, 6 to 9 months out, and you're practicing, you're looking at the sun consistently, directly, within the first hour or the last hour of the day for about 45 minutes. Some people practice longer. I was doing about 2 hours a day at my peak level of practice, but I was doing an hour in the beginning, an hour at the end of the day. But 45 minutes seems to be the range that most sun gazers recommend. And then that's it. In theory, they say that after you reach that state of 45 seconds in about 9 months of practice, your physiology changes somehow to where you don't actually need to actively sun gaze anymore. Your body will naturally absorb sun rays even in indirect light and get the same benefits. But certainly you can continue if you want to. So that's, in a nutshell how the practice is done. It's not that complicated. Some sun gazers do recommend barefoot on the ground while you're sun gazing. You can do that if you want. I didn't do that, but I find there's still benefits regardless. One of the most basic side effects, which are similar to energy transfers, is that sun gazing actually does raise consciousness. And the majority of people who do it regularly do experience higher states of joy and bliss and just a sense of peace in their life. And you may find a reduced desire for food or material things. So, and health benefits are there too. A lot of people experience significant health changes as a result. So if you're interested in it, I'd say there are lots of people out there who teach it, and you can learn under one of them. But the practice is very simple. It's not really rocket science. It's been around for thousands of years, and the best things are often the simplest things.
I'm not sure about this one, but do you know about human design, manifestors, generators, projectors, and reflectors, and how this relates to who we are from a psycho-spiritual perspective?
Yeah, it's I never studied it in depth, but I'm familiar with it. Human design combines, I believe, numerology, astrology, I Ching, and I think tarot or something else. I can't recall, but it's basically combining different divination techniques into one. I think it's a pretty good system. There's so many methods of divination and psychological self-analysis out there. Okay. Yeah.
I discovered it, honestly, just maybe 6 months ago.
Yeah.
But I'm a projector, so. I'm gonna hand you the mic. Over here, out there. Thanks. Yes, I'm discovered that I was a projector, and it really put a lot of things in perspective of my personality and how I move through the world and different things that I had run into my whole life and really didn't understand. But it's kind of a new philosophy, though it's not really been around. In the 80s, somebody, a guy who got a download about this information, and there's a lot online. I just searched YouTube and things like that, and I've not gotten a reading because there are a lot of different threads and different things with the energy centers of your body that gets into a lot more detail. It's similar to maybe like even a tarot reading or something, I'm assuming. Mm-hmm. I have not gone that far with it. But it was something that was a tool for me that really did open my eyes to a lot of different ways that I am, and then other people as well, to understand how they operate, and to just gain that knowledge helps you to, be a little bit more, accepting of other people. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and accepting of myself too. I need a lot of rest, apparently. So I don't feel guilty when I rest now.
Yeah.
So that's been a really big, weight off of my shoulders, thinking I should be more active when I'm not. Mm-hmm. And, it's been a good thing for me.
Yeah. It's a good system. I've not delved into it in depth enough to learn it myself, but there are so many, in ancient times, these types of systems were commonplace. And nowadays, a lot of people are starting to bring these things back into the modern world, either through channel transmissions or some other means. There are so many great modalities out there, that being one of them. Just basic astrology, numerology are good. There's another one. Even Mayan astrology, I find, is very useful. They all have their own areas of focus. And if you were to look into all of them and get little reports for yourself, you may find that it explains a lot of why you are the way you are in the life you live. There's another one called Destiny cards, which use ordinary playing cards. I find that to be remarkably accurate in terms of not only your makeup, but also different cycles throughout your life. So, so there, all these tools are out there. They've been out there forever. As you know, some of them are newer than others, but for those of you who are seeking to understand yourselves and other people, or even, maybe you can't stand your husband and you don't know why, maybe you could get these reports and understand that person you're with and why they are the way they are. And that would help to explain the dynamics of the relationship, what role they play, even their own personal experience. So, as a simple small example, I do astrological consultations throughout the week, and when I have a consultation with somebody and I'm getting prepared for that call with them, I'll look at the chart beforehand and I'll look at the chart of what's happening at the time of the call. And I can always tell when that person is either going to be late or not show up, because it's in the chart at that time. So you can see things in the alignments that show you what's going on in the consciousness at that time, not only of that person, but in the collective. And so when somebody doesn't show up, I'm sitting there expecting that's going to happen. I still have to sit there and wait for them, but I am not surprised when they're not there. So things aren't as random as we think. Everything plays a role in our human experience, and we put those things in motion when we were born so that we could fulfill a certain experience. And tools like human design are just there for us to be able to systematically understand our human experience, in a more logical, rational way.
So, any suggestions for people who are extreme sensitives and cannot get out of overwhelming feelings?
I know my sister is. And so, I mean, it's kind of like you just have to understand that they have these issues, and you just, I've seen people that, have flying off the handle for just look at them wrong. So, so what I do is just be positive around them, and not accept, the what they're going through. I mean, understand that they're going through a hard time, but, don't take anything personal. Just know that we're all on our own journey, and, and just accept the person for who they are, So, I had to deal with that with my sister, and, yeah, she's doing good. We're on a even keel right now, and I'm really happy about that, So, yeah, you can't take anything personal for these people are oversensitive, because they're going through their own path, and everything. You never know what's gonna set them off, and basically, that's how I deal with it. Just tell them, I'm sorry you're having a bad day. It's is there anything I can do to help? Can you try to give them something positive to look at, and if you can't, just But I really don't.
Well, I'm referring more to, are there any crystals or rocks that can be used to help deal with crazy emotions, or sometimes you do those rock circles, right?
Yeah. I have a video on YouTube, and which I do create rocks and crystal circles. Now, a lot of people said, "Well, I don't have that many rocks," and all you need to have is one big enough to sit a chair in. So I asked my rocks and crystals, and they said, "Okay, feathers are for birds. You can use feathers. You can use regular rocks. You can use shells because they're from the sea, and all of them worked for connecting. To make that circle. And yeah, that's what I've done. Even me. I get emotional sometimes. I just create that circle, sit myself in, and seal myself in it, and just okay, rocks, do your thing, So that's how I handle that, and I have put people in. I've created circles for different people who are going through a hard time, and I've made it. That's why I did the video, so that people could use the tool, uh, and help themselves. But I find rocks and crystals and earth, and there's another really good thing. In Japan, they do that quite a bit. They go into a forest and they just have the trees help heal them, and if you see a tree, I don't know how many trees I've hugged. But there's such a healing process of going into the woods and being able to breathe that and listen to the animals scurry around and even when I'm in there, watch the trees, watch the wind and just how they go back and forth. And the other thing is, and I never really realized that. Do you know no tree ever touches the other tree on the top? They come close, but they're always like avoiding touching the other tree. So every tree has their own space. I found that was very interesting. I just learned that. I don't know. I guess it was last year or the year before. And the other thing too, trees have an underground network. So all their roots, and they're able to communicate with the other trees through this underground network. I'd love to be able to understand what they are saying. And it makes me think of this movie Avatar, where this woman, she's a scientist and she's putting a probe into the tree roots of the trees, and she says it's like they have their own language. They're communicating with each other. It's like one huge brain, and I really like that particular piece, in that movie. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's how I feel whenever I go into a forest. I just feel all that energy. So. Yeah, that's it's something that, and like I said, I was really glad to make the video, to teach people, having extra tools, to be able to use.
I want to add a little clarification here from the person who asked the question. She's talking about suffering, like grief and suffering that she can feel going on in the world today.
Well, there's nothing wrong with feeling the suffering of the world. I mean, we are here as human beings to feel, and having those emotions and empathy are what makes you human. And as the earlier channeling with Michaela was talking about, how a lot of the reptilian consciousness on the planet is centered around our politicians and world leaders, and those people don't really feel because they are more connected to that other part of themselves. They're not actually as human as the rest of us are human. So if you're feeling emotions and the suffering of the planet, that feeling of empathy is what makes you human. So you're not as reptilian anyway as most of the world leaders. So that's a good thing. But to be able to function in the world, and as a side note, Barb's talking about going into the forest and things of that nature. I find a lot of people with sevens in their numerology tend to be very hypersensitive, and one of the remedies for that is to be in nature more, because being in the woods does tend to calm the emotions and the nerves when you're feeling those sorts of extreme emotions. So that could be something that's positive, that could be beneficial. So there's nothing wrong with feeling it, but when feeling causes you to suffer or to not be able to function in your life is where there's a problem. You can feel empathetic to the hardships and suffering of the planet, as long as it doesn't stop you from moving forward in your own life, because nothing good comes if you're just sitting around suffering for the planet and not able to contribute to something better in the world. Now, there's certainly lots of things like Barb is talking about that would certainly be helpful. And energy transfers will also be helpful. And as I've spoken many times, it's the density in your energy field that tends to turn emotions into suffering. So emotions aren't bad. So if you're feeling something, that's not bad. When feeling becomes suffering, it is when it becomes a bad thing. So for example, if I hit my toe on a leg of a table and it hurts, well, that's a physical sensation in the body that the human body creates. And so I feel pain. Feeling pain is okay. Feeling pain is human. But if I'm still complaining about that table leg 10 years from now, that's suffering. So that pain might have long since gone. Although by my constant focusing and complaining about it, it might still be here 10 years from now. And that's where pain can turn into suffering. So you want to separate the difference between feeling pain and suffering from pain. Suffering from pain prevents you from moving forward, where feeling pain is just a sensation you're having in that moment. So if in this moment the world is suffering and you're feeling that pain, but in the next moment you can move forward with your life and maybe even do something to improve the state of the world, then that's a good place to be. And in that case, feeling pain is perfectly normal. It's a normal part of being a regular human being. And but I would suggest even things like meditation will help, because even in scientific research, they found that people who have a more developed prefrontal cortex, this front part of the brain, tend to manage their emotions a lot better. So even two people who may be experiencing similar emotions, one who has through brain scans they've determined has a more active prefrontal cortex. And the reason is because those emotions, the mind is functioning in a more complete way, where the intellectual thought can evaluate the emotion. Where if the emotion is running rampant in your mind or in your being, then and there's no way to evaluate the emotion intellectually, then we tend to get lost in emotion. So, but people who meditate a lot tend to have very well developed prefrontal cortex, and as a result, they don't tend to fly with the wind when it comes to emotional states. They may still feel the suffering of the world, but they can feel that while maintaining a state of stillness. That's really ultimately where you're wanting to get to. And things like energy transfers will help, meditation will help, even using binaural beats or the brainwave technology that I mentioned earlier. Those kinds of tools will certainly help. Probably some crystals that Barb's talking about will help. Foods will certainly help too. As you know, all the same tools that we mentioned earlier can also be helpful with managing emotions. So lighter, more live foods will also help to do that, because they tend to increase your energy field, expand your consciousness. And so anything you can do that works on consciousness will help you to do that. And as I said earlier, when you're feeling a negative emotion, don't resist it. Don't feel like I'm feeling this suffering of the planet right now and I shouldn't be feeling that way. Instead, if you can go fully into that and feel it to its fullest intensity, no matter how much it hurts, and in doing so, you'll be able to actually let it flow through you as opposed to getting stuck in it. So the problem isn't so much that you're feeling these emotions or feeling the suffering of the planet. The problem is that you're getting stuck there. And getting stuck there is what causes the suffering. So all these different tools will help you so you don't get stuck in that place. And if you find energy transfers are helpful for that, then just keep doing this. Keep coming to our events or play the videos from these events and just repeat the process. But there are many, many paths. Sun gazing, again, another great tool we talked about earlier, is also extremely helpful in managing your emotions so that you don't get stuck in those darker places longer term.
Barb, what's the best way to use crystals daily? And what's the best way to clean out our chakras and aura daily?
Well, and it doesn't have to be big, but any kind of crystal. It could be this size, it could be really tiny, it could be huge. It doesn't matter. Cleaning out your aura today, daily. You could go around and counterclockwise. Just hit your chakras real quick. Just run them right down through them. And then kind of around your head. And then, you can just kind of use the crystal to kind of brush away negativity. I've done that. Okay, feel negative day. Goodbye. I just scooted all away. I'm not accepting all this stuff, And, so that's what I do. It doesn't matter what size. It can be big, it can be small. Any kind of crystal. Basically, I like quartz crystals because I mean they make watches on it, so it's takes a liquid and keeps on ticking. And the energy of the I mean that's kind of silly, but the quartz crystals has a lot of energy in it. You could use other ones, but quartz is the best. I found for utilizing to just kind of push away anything negative. So, and it, like I said, doesn't matter. It can be a little tiny one, it can be a big one. It doesn't matter. The size doesn't matter. The energy is always the same. Well, I mean, in the larger ones, sometimes the energy is more concentrated, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I have a big one, and I mean, that one's really got it. But this one right here, I'm just feeling the vibration of my. Okay, I hear you. All right. It's saying, I'm just as good as the large one. They make me laugh sometimes with what they come up with. So anyway, that's how I would handle that, and that's what I do. In the mornings, I just kind of go, okay, I look at myself in the mirror and I look at my aura and everything. Okay, I think I need to work on it. And I just kind of go through and run through it and kind of just brush things up and go on with my day. Takes a couple minutes.
Ethan, is it likely that the small upturn in the U.S. market let me start again. Is it likely that the small upturn in the U.S. market that we see in the last few days will continue for another few days?
Maybe a few days, but not long term. No, I mean, I can't rule out it would continue for a few days or even a few weeks, but I wouldn't bet the farm on that. I think we're in the midst of a more long-term bear market in all major markets, but if you're referring to the stock market in particular, I don't think the bear market is over yet. The worst of it is still coming. But whenever you go in any direction, you're going to have retracements in the opposite direction. So what you're seeing now is just a temporary pullback from the downturn that happened. But not only the stock markets, but we are at the beginning of a very long-term financial downturn in the world. And I mean, you're not seeing it in the United States so much because the United States and the U.S. markets, because the U.S. is a world reserve currency, we are actually much more stable here. And so the last economy to collapse will be the United States. When the world economy collapses, we will be the last because the U.S. is still the world reserve currency. And because of that, other countries are more vulnerable to financial collapse than we are. And we're seeing that happening already. And for example, Sri Lanka just collapsed recently, and Turkey, several other countries too. So we're seeing the smaller countries that are the most net importers of products. So the countries that have the fewest resources, that import the most things, are the ones who are collapsing first. And so the countries that have the most resources, like Russia, for example, or the United States, will probably be the last to collapse because there's enough resources within the country and because the U.S. is the reserve currency. So to explain that in a different way, the United States, other countries produce different products. So for example, a lot of oil comes from Russia, or gold, actually. A lot of gold comes from Russia. And so they are a net exporter, meaning they produce actual products that are sold to other parts of the world. But until recently, those sales had to happen in U.S. dollars for most countries. So most countries, even Russia, for example, sold their goods in U.S. dollars. So the United States, though, is their main product. So in the United States here, our main product isn't a physical good, it's actually the US dollar. So when we buy something from another country, let's say oil or something, or textiles or whatever it may be, we are exchanging the dollar for that other country's product. So the other country may be selling us a physical good, and we're selling them a dollar. So the dollar is actually the number one product and export of the United States. And because of that, as long as it remains the world reserve currency, the United States economy will remain more stable than the rest of the world. But you can tell that we're on the verge of a major global collapse because several countries are starting to collapse already. And as they do, it's going to cascade to the next largest country, and eventually the US dollar will most likely not be the world reserve currency, at which point the US economy will also collapse. So what you're seeing in the stock market is just a prelude. It's an early stage of collapse that, yes, in the next day or several weeks we may see an upturn, but in the long term, I think for a little while we're going to see a downturn in the markets here.
Okay, so with regard to following happiness versus proactively working with a difficult issue, I find myself in the position of being called towards proactively attending to racial issues, something I never thought would be on my path. What are your thoughts on moving proactively into white-bodied discussions and experiences for the purpose of waking up to what's implicit within us?
I'm not sure what white-bodied means exactly, but I will speak in general about racism itself. By pursuing racist agendas, we are creating racism. So I know that's very unconventional, and a lot of people are going to get mad at me for saying that, but we've actually created more racism on the planet the last 2 years than we've had in a long time. And that's because so many people are focused on racism. As I said earlier, if you want to cure cancer, you stop talking about cancer. You stop having cancer support groups and cancer research centers and all these things, and cancer would go away tomorrow if we got rid of all of that. In the same way, the more we talk about racism, the more we are amplifying racism in our society. There's more racism today than there was 2 years ago. And it's because so many people have had it thrown in their face that a lot of people have become bitter over the whole idea and have become more racist, actually, too. So, this whole agenda of racism, first of all, racism, while it does exist in small pockets, and sure there are racist people on the planet today, but how many people do you know who are actually racist today? I mean, I don't know anybody who's racist, and probably most of you don't know anybody who's racist. So where is this whole narrative coming from? It's being created in order to manipulate society, in order to separate us from each other. Whenever you pursue something like that, you are actually making it worse. So if you are pursuing racism in order to solve the problem of racism, you're going to amplify and create more racism. Instead, forget about it and just go be a happy person and live a good life and do good things and help everybody. That's how you cure racism. It didn't need to be cured in the first place. We were already heading in the right direction. But we may actually see more racism now in the years ahead because of what happened in the last couple of years. And we may see that issue becoming more amplified. Anything done with joy and love cannot be a bad thing. So if you feel joy in your heart and you want to bring that to people of different colors, that's great. Do that. As long as it's authentic joy. All the racist narrative that we're seeing in the world today is in anger. And anything coming from there is not, or from a state of lack, or a state of pointing fingers at each other, saying you're doing something wrong, nothing good will come from that. But if you have genuine joy in your heart and you want to bring that to people of whatever color, so that would be my suggestion is if you're doing it because you think racism genuinely exists on the planet and people are suffering from it, that may not be a good foundation from which to go out and solve it. But if you're doing it from a place of joy in your heart and you want to bring that joy and love to as many people as possible, and you just happen to be drawn to people of a certain color to bring joy, then great. then do that. And in so doing, you'll lift up that race. But if, what's happened in the last 2 years is by pointing at a race and saying those people are suffering because white people are bad, we are actually committing racism against both. And we've just made the plight of darker skinned people worse. And we've made the plight of white skinned people worse. This is the global agenda that these overlords or elite people who are trying to do. They're trying to separate us from each other by pointing to one group and saying that group is bad because the other group is bad. And this is not going to result in a more peaceful, conscious world. And the same is happening with gender these days, right? I mean, we're seeing all of these narratives being perpetuated in our society today in order to separate us from each other so that we are afraid of each other, so we point fingers at each other, masked people versus unmasked people, vaccine people versus unvaccinated people. This is what we're seeing in society today. It's all fake. And you're going to see more of it in this decade ahead, so be prepared for that. So unless you want to start support groups for masked people and support groups for unmasked people and support groups for black people and don't forget Indian people and white people. White people are going to need racist groups soon too, actually, because by the time we're done with all this in the next, in the 2030s, we're going to need, anti-racism for white people because all of you have been marginalized, right? So this is not a good thing. We cannot create unity and consciousness by separation. We have to do it together. And that's not what any of those movements are about. And especially the centralized parts of those movements, many of you may know that even the Black Lives Matter organization, which was championed by so many people the last 2 years, they ran off with the millions of dollars they collected and bought themselves mansions and paid their families, and so all those donations that people made to support anti-racism ended up being embezzled by the founders of the organizations for their own benefit. So this is what you're going to see. You're going to see all of these movements in the years ahead falling apart under their own weight, and all of these disclosures coming to light. And that's not even a disclosure. I mean, it's obvious. It's in the legal documentation. They're probably going to see lawsuits pertaining to that effect in the years ahead. So don't follow these fads. They are just misleading you and misguiding you to fight with each other and to point fingers at each other as, you're wrong and I'm right, or that person's right and that person's wrong because their skin color happens to be a little bit different. This is all falsehood.
And I always say there's no color in love. And I love everybody, so it doesn't matter to me. I don't see it.
I think we can fit 2 more quick questions in, and then we'll do the energy transfer. And that's what we have left. So Ethann, I just found out from our local health store that there's legislation being put forth to regulate supplements so that they have to be approved in a similar way to prescription medication, going through expensive drug trials, etc. Are you aware of this? Can you speak on this?
Yeah, I'm aware of it. It's been going on for decades now. It's nothing new. Every few years we see new legislation to require supplements to be licensed or only prescribed by doctors and so on. It's not going to amount to anything in the end, but you may see little restrictions here and there. But again, as I said, as we go into this decade further, we're going to see the systems are going to try harder to limit because far too many people remained healthy the last 2 years without vaccines. And so we have to get to the source of that, right? And they've managed to ban certain things, like, for example, N-acetylcysteine is illegal in the United States now because people were using it and remaining healthy. You can still get it in some places, but Amazon doesn't carry it anymore, or other things, right? So in order for the pharmaceutical agenda to continue working, and of course now, we've got to be worried about getting a monkeypox, so that's the next thing. But when that's over, that'll be the next thing. And so we're going to see this escalation taking place in society to put more limits on people so that we cannot continue to maintain optimal health. I wouldn't worry about it. Even if those things do happen to come to legislation, there are going to be solutions and loopholes around it. So we're not going to be limited as a society. Anytime there's an obstacle over here, some solution presents itself over here. So as long as you're maintaining a higher state of vibration, you're always going to be pulled in that direction. So even if something becomes unavailable to you over here, if you are maintaining a higher state of consciousness, you're going to naturally be pulled this way and to something else that will be even better. And that's what they can't actually plan for. Governments move very slow, but society and consciousness moves very fast. So while they're limiting this old thing over here, this new thing over here is being born and is even better than the old thing. And then they've got to chase after that new thing. This is happening in the alternative financial system right now with the cryptocurrency movement and everything. Governments are trying to limit and restrict, but as they do, some new innovation pops out over here that they haven't thought of yet. And so this is what we're going to see is consciousness moves much faster than the lower vibrational consciousness and the reptilian consciousness that is in control of the physical world these days. So I'm not too worried about that because those supplement legislations have been around forever, and they've never been able to push them through to anything meaningful that really restricts us in any major way. But I can see why they're trying to do it, and you should expect more of that happening this decade.
Okay, so I think we can move into the energy transfer with a couple of quick questions about it. So, Ethann, your healing sessions are amazing. How many sessions do we need, or is it ongoing with the incremental changes that are happening? And also, does the collective that you work with update you on the improvement or lack thereof of the human collective in terms of a more peaceful and sustainable Earth?
Is that both questions? Those are two questions. Mm-hmm. Well, you don't need any. So you can turn off this live stream and go back to your life. You don't really need any energy transfers. It's up to you. You know, wherever you want to be, if you feel called or drawn to this, then do it. And if you find benefits from it, then certainly do it. But it's not for everybody. Not everybody is at a place where it makes sense for them to do this, and maybe their consciousness is not ready to expand or to move to something different. And that's okay. There are plenty of people on the planet today who just need to be where they are. Now, the collective is going to move regardless, and it'll drag everyone along, whether they're ready or not. But on an individual basis, you can be farther ahead of the collective at any given time. And that's this process, doing this with me at these events, is going to move you farther along than the rest of the collective. And so in that sense, though, that's up to you to decide. And if you find it beneficial and you continue to find it beneficial, then keep doing it. And keep doing it until you don't. And that's the best advice I can give you as far as deciding what is the right thing to do for you. And if you continue to find it, you're happier and you feel lighter and you're suffering less in your life. Some people have physical benefits too. Certainly that could occur. As long as that's continuing and it's improving each time, I suggest keep doing it. And if someday you wake up and it just doesn't feel right anymore, then don't do it. Now, as far as the collective is concerned, I've not recently really had a conversation with that collective to see what the current state of the world is. I've been meaning to, and I probably will. And soon we're working on a new filming studio, so probably once that's done, we'll start doing more events where we discuss these kinds of things. But at the moment, I don't know. All I can say is because the world has had so much disclosure the last 2 years, meaning so many people are waking up to things that they didn't even know existed before. I mean, 2 years ago, everyone thought Bill Gates was a software engineer. Now they realize that he's a little insane. So this is where disclosure is happening, right? People are starting to wake up to things that have been there all along, but they didn't even know. Even spiritual gurus like Sadhguru, who we even talked about, and I, supported his work until recently, realized he's not actually who he is. So this is disclosure. We are seeing that happening. And because that's happening, suggests to me that we're much more improved now than we were 2 years ago as a consciousness. Because as consciousness expands, more disclosure will happen. Our awareness of what the world really is like will become more clear. And in that clarity, we can make different choices. And we can choose to live in a more abundant way in the world. But, stay tuned for that, though. In the near future, these days everything takes forever. So our studio's taken a year and a half, 2 years to build, but we're almost there. So hopefully in the next few months or couple months we'll have that done, in which case we'll start doing a lot more videos on these subjects, and I'll have a conversation with the collective at that time and see where we are with things. Okay, so we'll do the energy. Wait, was the other question? Is that it? That was it. Okay. All right, so we'll do the energy transfer now. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, I'm not going to spend time explaining the process, or the reasons. You can watch previous videos where I talk about that. You just need to be there and participate. Don't really need to do anything particular. There is a multidimensional collective or rather a 13th dimensional collective of beings of different backgrounds, ascended masters, different extraterrestrial races, Pleiadians, Arcturians, etc. Jesus, Mary Magdalene, all of those beings who have ascended to the highest level of development are in the 13th dimension. And they, through this physical structure, will facilitate this process on your behalf. So you just need to simply be here or be online and hold that intention. And because the 13th dimension does not exist in time, as we do here, this process can be repeated using the videos at any time without me consciously being aware of your intention. So if you want to repeat this process, just play the video later at any time you want and just follow along, and they will facilitate it on your behalf. Doesn't matter where I am. And my only role here is that this physical body or physical structure is anchored in the 3rd dimension and 13th dimension simultaneously, which allows them to move this energy between both. So they're doing the work. I'm just here to allow them to do that. So it's a 2-part process. Part of it is to remove your density in your energy field. And everybody has some. Most people have too much. And if you want, you can follow along, visualize that as a dark cloud of energy from your energy field, send it to mine. No harm comes to me in that process. And at the same time, this 13th dimensional collective will be sending an energy through my heart center from the 13th dimension to all of you, whether you're here in person or watching virtually online. And that'll be going on all throughout as well. And Barb describes people who repeated this process, their auras get bigger and continue to grow each time. So it's a cumulative process the more times you do it. And also your density will lessen, which will help with the suffering and living in the world today and making better choices and being guided to things that are more empowering for you to live a better life. So do you want to talk about what you see in the room?
Well, actually, that's really interesting because there's a lot of green around. It's like everybody came here to do some healing, except for one. So, you're lavender, but that's also a good color, because lavender is also a healing color. So, but everyone else seems to be green today, and so it just feels like they're in healing mode. So that's a good thing.
Okay, good. So you can just hold that intention to participate, or you can visualize the different colors of energy, and that's fine too. I'll play a little music from our friend Mark Romero in the background during the process as well. So close your eyes and breathe comfortably. My eyes will be closed as well. And focus your intention on sending density to me. And keep doing that all throughout, or just sit there and be willing to participate. At the same time, the 13th Dimensional Collective will be sending a white light through my heart center to all of yours to raise your consciousness and vibration. So I'll be silent now and play a little music, and I'll come back when we're done.
the energy coming from, especially from the online people. I mean, it was just, I mean, it was so um, dark at first, and then it just lightened up and lightened up. And it actually changed to blue, which was very interesting. I've never seen blue, which was, I've never seen it coming out of the camera, which is telling me that you have accepted everything that, and it take to heart everything Ethan and I've been saying, and it was like an acceptance, and so. I mean, that was very interesting. And in the room, I mean, I just saw everybody's auras just go right through the ceiling. I'm going, I was looking at everyone. It's like, wow, And the energy, I just felt so much energy coming from you. And it was like, it was a lot like you just like I took a bunch of baggage and just got rid of it because Ethan was all dark, here for a minute, and then he just got lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. But that was every time we could have a session. It's always a little bit different, but now you online people, you're awesome. I mean, everyone's awesome. You guys here in the room are awesome too. I mean, the experience and to watch everyone's auras just go shooting up like you're connecting, to the higher levels, as well as releasing burdens. It was wonderful. I was just I'm trying not to, yeah.
Any last minute questions or anything? Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us in person and online. And we'll be back next month to do this all over again. And we hopefully will have a studio soon. We'll put out some other videos too. So thank you again, and we'll see you soon.